Winter Dreams by F. Scott Fitzgerald, recommended to us, and I don't know why. I don't even remember who at this point. I'm assuming it's because it's like a little mini Great Gatsby. I don't know.
I gotta be honest, I was dreading reading this. You know I'm not a big fan of Fitzgerald, and I knew this story kind of had that premise. Ain't gonna lie, I enjoyed it. I think there's some good stuff to talk about here. Yeah.
Now remind me, when you read, because you read it was Great Gatsby, I assume, right?
Read it in high school, taught it in high school, wrote papers about it, analyzed it, all the good stuff. And it was so boring to me.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, many times forced reading, particularly in high school where you wanted to read something else, you revisit it years later, you seem to have a different view.
Yeah, agreed. And I think also which reiterated my, I don't want to say loathing, but just disregard for it might be a better way to phrase it, is I was then in turn forcing children that I was teaching to do the same thing because it's part of our curriculum. So it's like I went through this misery of not enjoying it, and now I'm doing this to others. It made me feel really guilty. And I'm like, I know what you're going through, guys, but this is part of what I'm told we have to teach you. So maybe that's a lot of it too, which I had such a negative regard for him and the story. But this is solid. I really, really enjoyed it. I think there's some good points that he makes about life and whatnot in here.
Well, I think there's something to be said as we talk about this. Believe it or not, this is part of our discussion already. When you're a kid, you have different wants, desires, and dreams and expectations of those dreams. And some of those dreams you accomplish as an adult, or you start to experience. And some you never attain, but some that you do, you start to realize that's not really what you wanted, right? Like sometimes it's disillusionment. Sometimes it's the chase after the dream that mattered than the actual end goal itself. Like I think there's something to be said with what our boy Dexter Green experiences, because you'll see what Fitzgerald does is he puts Dexter Green like in front of you as a kid. Right? He's a caddy at this golf course. He's playing through these dreams of winning this golf championship over and over and over in his head, only to ultimately do it, only to kind of see this young, beautiful girl who was 11 when he was 14 and said, you know what? I'm done. I quit. I'm going out, and I'm too old for caddying is what he says, but I'm going to go out. And I think it's because he wants to start chasing his dreams because he wants more than what he has right now is kind of how I took the opening.
For sure. A lot to digest there. I do want to go back to your first point. I think that for me, what I took away from it, kind of metaphysical-ish for my life comparative to Dexter Green and my interpretation of Fitzgerald, is that we all want glittery things. We all want beautiful things. And when I was a kid reading this story, I wanted to read sci-fi and fantasy. I wanted to read Tolkien. I wanted to read Robert Jordan. I wanted to read Stephen King. I didn't want to read this. I wanted my brain candy. That was what I enjoyed at the time. And so kind of bring it back to your point of this was forced upon me, and I struggle with that. Now, to your point about, what I want of an 11-year-old and moving forward, it kind of comes back to that thing is the journey is always way more important than the destination. And we see throughout the story of what happens to Green throughout of every time he basically achieves his goal. And it's like, meh, right? And that's how a lot of us, I think, feel sometimes, at least as you get older.
And the problem is I agree with the statement that the journey is more important than the destination, but there are certain stops that are pretty important along the way. Dexter, he goes out to school out on the East Coast, and he wants that high education because he wants to parlay that. And, we have this quick overview of his life where he gets the $1,000 to buy into a laundry service, does that, gets really good at it, has a niche service catering to the rich, ends up selling stuff like that, going out to New York. Like, you get a quick overview that you start to see I think the promise that's told to a lot of people of the American dream of if you work hard, you put your nose down, you're smart, and give people what they want and make money off of that, you're going to accomplish wealth in your life, right? And I think Dexter accomplishes that, at least on paper, from a monetary perspective, at least in the beginning, right? But what does he not have through this? It's that little picturesque family, right? Like the wife, the two kids, the picket fence, right?
Yeah, he doesn't have love. He doesn't have happiness in a sense. And I guess that's what I hate to come back comparing this story to The Great Gatsby, but a lot of things of Fitzgerald's, why I don't like it, is that kind of mentality of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you just work hard and you'll achieve everything. And that's not true, because if you go back to the beginning of the story, Dexter Green comes from a very wealthy family, the second best store in town. They have means. He has opportunity. And yes, he's a hard worker. And people comment on that he's the best caddy and he works hard. You know, that boy worked hard. He's a worker. He's a, good boy. And that is important. I mean, obviously that's been instilled into him to not just coast on his family's money. But if you don't have that money and you don't have those opportunities, sometimes, not all the time, obviously, but sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you work, you're going to be stuck in that rut. And I think that's something important that we can pull out of this story.
Privilege, right? Not everybody has the same resources. And if we look at what was once 11-year-old girl, right? He's going out on a golfing trip. He sees where he's come from. Like, he sees the caddies. He sees where he's gotten to. Now he's golfing with one of the people he used to caddy for. He still doesn't have the wife, right? We hear 4, and Judy hits a ball and strikes one of the men, walks up. The men are just all ravished by her beauty, right? It's kind of like a little mini Carintha, if you remember that from Gene
Yes.
Killers. Yeah. It's kind of like, it wasn't her, it was the idea of her. It was the fetishization of her.
Yep.
And I would call that pretty privilege, is what is a modern term that we use today. That obviously that wasn't back then. But she gets things other people don't get because she's pretty.
Isn't that true? And I say that all the time. And I hate that about our world, that I don't know what it is innately about, humans, animals, life, but it's who you know, and if you're pretty. And that's an advantage some people don't have, right? And again, if you don't know somebody or you can't get that opportunity, you might not see the success that Green and Judy and others have. And I think that that's kind of put in our face here, but I think that's for a point to show that that's not everything, right? Because as Green moves forward and he has these successes, he realizes that beauty isn't everything. It's something, and that's definitely true, but it not necessarily everything.
I kind of wonder, because what Dexter goes through, right? Like, he has this, most people would say, if we're talking about the stops in the journey, right? The fact that he hit that stop for being financially secure, for being successful. Well, like, a lot of people are like, hey, I didn't hit that stop. I sure wish I could hit that stop. And not everybody does, to your point, have the ability to do those things based on resources and starting points, right? But his life is like almost kind of peaceful, I want to say. If I remember correctly, he was even like on a raft, just enjoying the piano waters. When she comes like zipping up, like on her little boat, and even like the waves start hitting him. So even the idea of her beauty coming in and invading his thoughts, to her boat coming up and disturbing the peaceful waters around him, even when you do have certain things, you find you can always be hungry for something more, right? And I'm not saying that Dexter should have been happy with just money, that he should have been happy even if he was lonely and not with someone else. But it's like, there's something to be said about always craving something more and being dissatisfied with what your current station is. I think it's okay to drive for more, but there's something I feel that was insecure with Dexter at this point. The way that he just immediately fell into Judy's tornado, right? Like, going to her house, there's no parents there. She even like puts it right there on the table. She's like, oh, I really like this guy, but he was poor. And this whole time, like, bro, Dexter, like, no red flags, my guy, like nothing going off in your head. And I felt like Fitzgerald did a pretty good job of painting Dexter to be somewhat likable. I'm not saying he's the most likable character, but when she's just like, who are you? He says, I'm nobody, he announced. My career is largely a matter of futures. And I think he's being honest here, right? Like he doesn't believe that his money gives him stature over others the way some people do. But then, when she's like, well, do you have money? And he's like, oh, honey, I'm filthy rich. Like he still gets dragged into the tornado wanting them more, even though she's just like, she's disturbing the waters. That's what I'll say.
Do you think she was playing him? Because I felt like she knew that all along. She's a little bit deceitful, and she almost steals his happiness. That he has her up on a pedestal, and she's manipulating him, molding him, shaping him. She knows how to use her beauty. She knows that money is important to some people. And I feel like the crux of the story is that she misreads him. And I think that is a lesson that we can take away from this, is that, being vain and beauty and money and all these things are great. But I feel like Dexter, well, yeah, again, not maybe the most likable character. He is honest with himself. He's truthful to himself, and he chooses a different path, and good on him, because he could have gone with her and married Judy and had a family, and he would have ended up unhappy regardless of what he thought he wanted as a young man.
Do you think she could represent something more than just being a character that was attractive?
Like she is the embodiment of desire?
I think she's the embodiment of being dissatisfied with your current situation. She represents that constant, unattainable chase. Or does she also represent maybe the top, right? Like if we look at the Sisyphus challenge of always pushing the rock up, when the rock falls down, you have to keep pushing her up. You're never really the top a lot of times. Like, again, this is a very broad comment, but like whenever you're at the top, you can't be complacent. Why? Because then everybody's gunning for you. Whatever puts you up there. If it's a specific product, there's races to duplicate it, races to make it the exact same but cheaper, or races to improve on your product and make it better quality. You could be the most successful person in the world. You can't be happy with just being at the top. And Judy is like that desire to constantly want more, that insatiable hunger, almost like unfettered greed, I think, on some level, where all these other men, a dozen other men courting her, and even Dexter finds out and still does it because everybody wants something they can't have. They want that next step. And that's what I think Judy represents for a lot of these men, is that chase for the thing that they can't obtain.
And Green has been reluctant to do that his whole life, right? We see that at the beginning of the story when he dreams of the golf tournament with Hedrick. I think I said his name right. And beating him and smashing him and then just like obliterating him. And then when he finally plays him and he had this all hyped up in his head, he does crush him because he was mediocre. And I think that's kind of what we come back to with Judy, is that his idea of her is not in sync with reality. And as a result, it doesn't pay off. And in some cases, he's good for not trying that. I mean, taking risks is great. You can turn out very wonderful and successful, but sometimes listening to your heart or being a little bit conservative in your choices can be a good thing too. So it's that balance of life of sometimes you go with your heart, sometimes you go with your gut, sometimes you go with your mind. It's very situational. And I feel like that's the crux of the story, is we see Green going through all of these situations in life and making different choices. He never sticks with one thing. He never always just goes with just the same old every time. He does seem to be evolving throughout the story and trying to make different choices in different situations.
Well, it's like right as he, I don't know, I'm married, I have kids, so I'm biased. Right as he's about to marry Irene, he's to kind of settle down and hopefully kind of like learn to dedicate himself to someone else. Again, that's how I view life. Like that's the goal I was hoping for him to take. And that desire comes up again for something more. And when he goes to stay with Judy, like that was heartbreaking. But it also, I mean, she's up there with like Kathy from, the Steinbeck novel, East of Eden. It's East of Eden. Or even better for you, Anita from Player Piano. She's that character.
I knew you were gonna bring it up.
That just because she really is a good character in the sense of just how, I don't know. Do you feel Fitzgerald externalizes evil too much? Like it's the Eve made me do it, not the I had the choice to do it problem. Like I feel like there's a little bit of externalization. Like when I read this quote particularly, says, "The familiar voice at his elbow startled him. Judy Jones had left a man and crossed the room to him. Judy Jones, a slender, enameled doll in cloth of gold, gold in a band at her head, gold in 2 slipper points at her dress's hem." Like, even just like looking at her being all gold, representing that insatiable desire that pulls him away, like the snake at the Garden of Eden, if you will. Like, he has a choice here, and he chooses to leave Irene, and I think that's what's the saddest part. This is him leaving his Garden of Eden, if you will.
I think we could pull a few little strings of, religion and time of when this was written, and the fact that if you work hard, working hard next to godliness, and you'll get everything you want. You just you got to put your nose to the grindstone. I think that could be true here. Judy is pushing the forward story and allowing Green to grow, really, right?
Does he grow? Like, this is where it's hard because he goes to war, right? Comes back, he's 32, he's living in New York because he sold his business and is now in New York, right? And is successful. How do we define growth? Because one of Judy's husband's friends comes to visit and is like, "Oh, yeah, my buddy, he married Judy." And he's just like, "Wasn't she great?" Right? Like, probably picturing her in gold, like almost like she's like the Emmy statue or something. And he's just like, "Well, I mean, she's all right." Right? Like, this guy, I think, is the first time we get an external view on Judy where it's like, well, was Judy all that great? Like, I don't know. Like, there were 12 men that thought she was great. But I think that also has something to say about what you wish is always beautiful to you, and that chase. And this guy, I don't know what his level of happiness was. I don't know what he wanted, but it wasn't Judy, right? Judy wasn't some beautiful, crazy vixen that everybody wanted. And I know there's a lot of talk in town about it, so I guess it's not fair. We know that she was attractive, right? But she's not attractive to everyone that doesn't crave something like that, right? So his dream is almost kind of like empty once he realizes like that it doesn't bring the happiness, the constant chase, I think. But he came from, was it Minnesota? I think I was reading something about Target today, so now I can't remember if it was the article on Target or if he was from Minnesota. But the point being, wherever he was from was cold, okay? And it's not New York. So was the winter dream like that idea of what he wanted on that golf course, of like the perfect life with money, with this, this woman that everyone thought was beautiful. And he realizes that like sometimes dreams don't live up to reality.
Yeah, reality versus idealism. And I think that you have sprinkled in there a little bit of economics. You have sprinkled in there the American dream. What does that mean to Dexter? And yeah, I think that he has grown because he's realized that it isn't what he wanted, it's what he thought he wanted. And to know that takes true growth.
The dream was gone. Something had been taken from him. I don't know, man. You may not have liked Fitzgerald being forced to read him, but there's some slamming lines in this.
I told you, this almost has me converted. My reality of Fitzgerald versus the idealism of Fitzgerald of my English teachers in high school, very different. We're coming close to the middle now.
All right, let us know in the comments down below what other Fitzgerald stories we should cover. We'd love to hear from you. My name has been Una. Thank you for spending time with us. Peace out.
Peace.